I'm doing my personal narrative reflection on leadership, and probably one of the most profound leadership experiences I've ever had, aside, maybe in addition to coaching teams, which, working together to get the buy-in from your players and stuff. But the one I wanted to talk about that really shaped me and taught me the most about teaching was I had to come up with, I was on this group called Focus on Freshmen, and it was a collaborative team effort from every high school in Wake County had to send a group to this meeting for the district. And what we learned at this meeting was that EdStar, a company that Wake County had contracted to study the data, they had taken the data and they had determined that 80% of the dropouts in Wake County public school system could be accounted for by having one or more of these three readings. And the first one was um, failing Algebra 1, failing 8th or ninth grade, which could largely be attributed to English 1 in ninth grade in most cases, and being long-term suspended in 8th or ninth grade. So what we took is that what we did was each team had to come up with these plans. What could we do with the data? What could we use that data to create or to change things? How could we use that data to improve things at our school? And so our team didn't really have the schedule that would allow for us to meet a lot. And so we each came up with an idea and came back together, and then we shared our ideas and we chose one to go with. Well, my idea was that if we can predict these students that are going to drop out, or at least 80% of them eventually, then let's take kids with at least two of those factors and put them into a special English class. That my idea was a little bit more complex than that. I wanted it to be students who failed English 1 and Algebra 1 would have me as an English 1 teacher and then an Algebra 1 teacher, and we would do like fresh literature. We wouldn't do the same literature that they had done before, because even if they failed English 1, they kind of knew, what happened to Romeo and Juliet. So the idea was to have a smaller class and really target these students. They would be in the same class with me for English, and then they'd have the same math teacher. And there was another component that we could bring in. We had a crisis counselor or a school counselor would be, working with their class regularly, consistently, coming in a couple times a week, just like talking to the students, checking in with them. The idea was putting more hands on those students. And then also every Friday we were supposed to have an administrator come in for like a round table type discussion. I'd bring in a snack and a drink, and we just kind of talk about, it would not be like academically graded or anything. It'd just be a chance for students to share and talk to an adult and, get to know more of the adults in the campus. And so that was my idea. Well, it was one of those things where it's like, oh, congratulations, your idea is the best. Now you get to teach it. So I ended up with about 20 students, which was the max that I wanted in that class. And then 2 ended up not either leaving the school, or it wouldn't work out schedule-wise or something. So I ended up with 18 for the entire semester. I had students that had failed English 1 once, twice, and even 3 times in this class. I had two girls and 16 boys in the class. And so my leadership style is kind of that servant leadership, where I focus on relationships and meeting the needs of the group, and moving towards a common goal and a common vision. And so one of the things that I tried to do is that I knew that I needed to get these students to trust me. I needed to make it more fun, more engaging. I went away from the longer novels, and we did some shorter textual selections and things. I tried to pick short stories and nonfiction pieces that would really relate to students' lives. So I was looking at engagement and all these things. But the thing that I really wanted to share that really shaped me was, like, the first 4 weeks were pretty awful. Like, the students were so resistant. They did not want to do the work. They weren't interested in English. They weren't interested in getting to know me. They didn't open up. They didn't trust me. It was just they showed up, but they didn't want to be there, kind of a thing. And so after about 4 to 5 weeks of this, I played games. I brought in snacks. I tried to take care of other needs. Trust them in a way they haven't been trusted. If you need food, here it's over here on this table. Help yourself. On your honor, take one or whatever. And if you need a toothbrush or deodorant or things, I had like supplies and things like that. So I tried to take care of other needs, thinking that, well, maybe that's one of the reasons they're not engaging in school, because I've always heard, students who come to school, students who are loved at home come to school to learn. Students who are not loved at home come to school to be loved. And so I felt like I was dealing with a lot of students who weren't getting the support that I was used to having at home. And so I tried to combat it that way. And finally, after about 5 weeks of that, I had a moment where, I was almost on the verge of tears. And it was, I was like, gosh, guys, like, you couldn't have always hated school, right? You weren't born hating school. There had to be a time in your life when you liked school. Like, I don't understand. You guys show up every day, but you fight me every step of the way. I try new literature. I try, to be more interesting. I try using video, try using short. I'm trying all these things. I'm standing on the top of the chair to get your attention. I'm doing everything I know to do. And you guys are so resistant. Like, what is it about school that makes you hate it so much? And one kid named Michael raised his hand, and I'm like, oh, great. He raised his hand. This is great, and he said, well, when I was in 4th grade, my teacher told me I was stupid, and I've hated school ever since. And then another student shared, well, my mom told me I'd never amount to anything. And so I don't even know the point of trying. And as we went around the room, every single student in the class had a moment where they could tell me about why something that had happened, to where somebody questioned their ability, didn't believe in them, whether it was a teacher, a parent, other students. But there was a moment each of them felt like somebody didn't believe in them, and so they didn't believe in themselves, and so they had lost the motivation to even try. And so it was like a tangible moment in time. When that sharing happened, it was like something changed in the group. Now, there were still days like I had a lot of students who were dealing with real adult problems, students that were, probably in gangs, and students who actually were in gangs, students who were dealing with violence at home, students who were dealing with abuse, students who were dealing with hunger and poverty and things outside of school that really did prevent them from really being the student that they could be. I remember specifically after that discussion, though, it was like there was a shift. And at least for the moment when they came into my classroom, and there were days when they would still, have an outburst. I got cussed out a few times, and there were still some little altercations between some students in the classroom, and arguments when opinions were shared. So it took, it was not like smooth. I don't want to make it sound like it was smooth going, but from that moment on, at least they knew, like, they could push me. They could not push me literally. Like, push me away, like, as far as, I'm not going to let you teach me today. And then they'd show up the next day, and I'd be right there ready to go again. Like, I didn't hold it against them. I didn't, I knew they were going to have bad days, but when they came in, it's just like this magical thing that happened. And these students believe for the first time in probably, 10 years for some of them, that they actually could do it. And so, I started out with, after they shared their feelings, I said, I'm sorry that happened to you. That's unfortunate. That is, it's wrong. You should have the support. I believe you can do it. I don't care what anybody else says. I know that you can do this. And I know that you can be successful in here if you will just trust me. Participate. You come every day. Why not just give it a shot? And from that day forward, I got more work. Kids were more productive. They trusted me. They would come by and see me all kinds of the day, like, hey, where are you at? Why aren't you in your other class? They wanted to come. So it was like we became this little family type of thing. And I even had like another class. I remember specifically I had a student in another class that really was a discipline problem for me. Gave me a lot of flack, and he was one of those, he would get in trouble and distract others, but he didn't ever do anything really bad enough that would make him get to this suspension level very often, until you got like 10 infractions. He was just really disrespectful and rude towards me. And I'd have some of my students in this at-risk class, this class I was piloting, and they'd say, hey, Mr. I can take care of that for you. I heard he was disrespectful to you. So it was kind of like that. How brothers and sisters are like, oh, I can talk about my sister, but you can't. So they were very protective of our group. So we became like this little family. And I actually, the day we took the EOC, which was the final measuring, 20%, 25% of their grades, it was really important. Especially some of them were, hovering around 70 something, or right. This is when failure was a 69, and so a lot of them needed to do well on this test to earn their credit. And I remember out of the 18, we had a student who the strongest student in that class by far, and his name was Antonio. And I won't say last names for privacy, but I told him, I said, Antonio, you're so smart. You should be in an honors level class. I don't know why I said, have you never been tested to be academically gifted? Have you never been in an honors class before? Has no teacher ever told you that you belong in honors class? He was so bright, so smart. And he just looked at me and he said, Miss Stone, you're the only person in my entire life that's ever told me I was smart. And this kid is 17 years old in English 1. So, you know, just just that moment for him, like just knowing that, I said, well, you should have been in honors all along. And after English 1, I'm going to recommend you for English 2 honors next year. And and the light, that came into his face was just a wonderful thing. And this student, unfortunately, outside of school, he got into a lot of trouble. And so he was probably put in these lower level classes because of behavior. It certainly wasn't because of ability, and maybe his behavior masked his ability, but he actually was in an altercation and was stabbed in the back, or had a wound in the back from this fight with some sort of weapon. I'm not sure what the weapon was. And he came to school for the EOC, and he was sitting like hunched over. And I was like, Antonio, you can come to the makeup time next week. You don't have to come today. He's like, no, I'm going to pass this test today. I'm coming with the rest of my class and I'm going to do this test. And that kid scored the highest score that I had in a level 4, which is the highest level you can get on the EOC, or it was at that time. And it was comparable with what other honors students in the school scored, and higher than some of the others. So it was just a great, successful moment that he was able to do that. Now, he did leave the school and move back in with his parents. He was staying with his grandmother to come to our school, and his grandmother was, pretty upset that he was moving back into a situation she felt would only make things worse for him, which is where he got into the altercation. But it really wasn't her choice. And I wish I could say I'd kept up with him over the years. I tried to keep up with him for a while, and then kind of lost touch. But I'm happy to say that out of the 17 students who ended up on the roster, um, by the end of the year, 14 of them who had failed English once, twice, 3 times, some of them, all passed with a level 3 or 4 proficiency on the English 1 EOC. One student didn't show up for the exam, so I'm not really sure what he could have done. So 2 really only scored below proficiency. One was ESL, and really, that really was, it wasn't his ability, it was the language barrier that prevented him. And one kid just, had missed a lot and just didn't make the mark, so to speak. But all in all, I mean, 14 of the 17 making it was just such a huge accomplishment for those students, and they were so excited. And I actually even asked my principal, please let me move up with these students. Give me the same class of English 2, and I'll just move up with them in English 2, English 3, English 4. Because the real challenge with this class wasn't so much their ability to do the work, it was their ability to trust the teacher teaching, and their relationship and the rapport with the teacher is what allowed them to really engage in the work. So it was perfect for me. And I always tend to navigate towards the at-risk student. And it makes sense now that I've studied all these leadership styles, because I do have more of that servant leadership, the relationship, the connection piece. That's really important to me. So it makes sense that I always end up navigating towards that student, because that is where the relationship piece is the most needed, and the strength of relationships and communication really go a long way, and trust, and go a long way with students who are resistant to being able to trust the teacher. I talked about in my blog post about how student Rita Pearson talks about students don't learn from people they don't like, and as a leader, I don't think you necessarily have to always be liked. Maybe respect is a better word, but I do think that that respect has to, go a little bit further into the realm of trust, especially as a teacher leader, right? And the students need to trust that you're invested, that you're in this with them, that um, you're gonna have their back, you're gonna be there and make sure that they're learning. You're not going to give up on them. And so I was tested a lot. The beginning seemed to be a big test, and I just had to keep showing up and keep passing these many little tests. That okay, is she for real? Does she mean what she says? So anyway, that experience for me as a leader, it really taught me that I have to get to know my students. I have to know where they're coming from. I have to know why they're not doing what they're doing, or why they're doing what they are doing. I need to know what it is about them that motivates them, that engages them. And as a really strong leader for me, a leader who's competent in whatever they're leading, like for in the case of teaching, competent in your subject or competent in your content would be really important. But beyond that, I think a good strong leader needs to be an excellent communicator and really know how to do that delicate balance of knowing where to draw the line between when to be firm and when to be bend a little bit, when to compromise, when really make it personal to who you have. And I'm not saying you should be unfair, because I think being fair is really important too. But I do think that there are circumstances, and life gets in the way sometimes, and there are times when you do need to yield or compromise a bit. And knowing when to do that, when to stand firm, and when to bend a little bit is a really delicate balance that a good leader does well. And then I also think that being approachable, being someone that people in the group that you're leading feel like they can come to and talk to, and that along the lines goes a long way with communication. But I think being approachable and being flexible and being firm when you need to be, but flexible when it's needed as well, knowing that balance, and then also being really competent and walking the walk. Like, I don't need to expect something from my students that I'm not willing to model or do as well. I need to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. So that's my leadership story, and it really taught me a lot about how important it is to really know your purpose and to know why you're doing something, but also to encourage others as a leader to really understand that it's the relationships and the connections that you make with people that help make that group stronger. So I don't think you should be a pushover. I don't mean to say that. And you need to be firm. And sometimes being a leader is uncomfortable, right? I mean, sometimes you have to get on to somebody or evaluate them, and you're not always going to have a positive evaluation of somebody. And you need to hold people accountable. And I had to hold my students accountable in class, and they sometimes they needed another chance, and other times they needed me to say, sorry, you missed the deadline. So it was that delicate balance of knowing when to be to hold people accountable, and when to be more understanding, and especially working with at-risk students, that line can get a little blurry sometimes. So this really taught me a lot about knowing what's going on in my students' lives will help me a lot as a leader. And that relationship, that servant leadership, is something that I'm, really works well with my qualities. And I just didn't know the name of it before I studied it in grad school. So thanks.